I think this gets to our central question of our series. What is God really like? Because that's what Philip is asking Jesus in John 14. Lord, show us the Father, and that would be enough. Well, here's what Jesus has to say in response to that. Jesus says, anyone who has seen me has seen the Father. Anyone who has seen me has seen the Father. Notice what Jesus is saying. God the Father is not out there waiting to be discovered. God the Father is not a different looking God from Jesus. If you want to know what the Father is like, look at Jesus. God is exactly like Jesus. If you've seen Jesus, you've seen the Father. And Jesus does not only just reveal himself or a part of what God is like, rather what we see Jesus doing is what God is doing. Jesus perfectly reveals God's triune nature. And so God is not a distant deity removed from our pain and struggles. God is like Jesus. And Jesus teaches us that God is with us, that God does not leave us or forsake us, that God is with us to the very end of age. Jesus also shows us that God is also not a demanding judge, ever accusing us. God is like Jesus. And Jesus forgives and welcomes sinners. He dines with tax collectors and hookers. Jesus comes into the world not to condemn the world, but to save it. And in Christ, there is no condemnation. Lastly, Jesus shows us that God is not a deterministic micromanager. God is not a helicopter parent who coercively controls us. God is like Jesus. And Jesus speaks of other wills at work in the world. Jesus never assumes that tragedy or sickness are the will of God. And instead, Jesus will heal the sick and bind up the brokenhearted. Jesus rules his kingdom not by control, but by love. Why? Because God is like Jesus. God has always been like Jesus. There's never been a time where God has not been like Jesus. We haven't always known this, but now we do.